Okay, so we're diving into some serious survival stuff today. You sent over a ton of material. Wilderness survival, disaster prepping. I mean, we've got guides on reading the stars, cooking gourmet meals in the wild.
Sounds like someone's been doing their homework.
Well, you know me. Got to be prepared. But there's one guide, this ultimate survival guide. That's got me intrigued.
Oh, intrigued. How? Did they finally reveal the secret to repelling mosquitoes? Because if so, I'm all ears.
Even better than that, this one claims the secret weapon for surviving, well, just about anything, is condoms.
Condoms, yeah.
Condoms, you heard right.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. I gotta hear. You know, I love when these guides get a little unorthodox.
Exactly. And this one goes all in. They're not talking about, the usual purpose. It's about using them in totally unexpected ways.
Okay, you've piqued my curiosity. Well, lay it on me. How does one go about using a condom for survival?
Well, for starters, they talk about using them as water containers.
Wait, really? How much water can you even fit in, you know?
More than you'd think, apparently. You fill it up, tie it off, maybe throw it in a sock for extra protection, and boom, instant canteen. They even suggest using them to collect rainwater.
Wow, I never would have thought of that. Talk about resourceful. But what about fire? You can't exactly start a fire with
That's where things get really interesting. They actually recommend using them like a magnifying glass. You fill it with water, focus the sunlight, and use that concentrated beam of heat to get your kindling going.
Like a DIY solar-powered fire starter. Now that is clever.
Right. It's all about thinking outside the box.
Right.
But wait, it gets even wilder. They also say condoms can be used for first aid.
First aid? Now that's just crazy talk.
I know, right? But they're serious. Apparently you can use them to protect a wound from infection or even fashion a makeshift tourniquet to stop bleeding.
Wow, I have to hand it to them. That's thinking on your feet. Who knew condoms could be so versatile in a pinch?
Right. It really makes you realize that anything can be a tool if you know how to use it. And get this, they even have a whole section on using them for signaling.
Signaling? Okay, you've got to tell me more about this one.
Imagine a hot air balloon, but miniaturized. You inflate the condom with hot air, attach a light source if you have one, and boom, you've got a makeshift signal flare that's visible for miles, especially at night.
That's both ingenious and slightly terrifying. I can't believe I'm saying this, but the condom survival guide might just be my new favorite.
And mine too. But keep in mind, this is just the tip of the iceberg. We've got a whole stack of these survival guides to unpack, and believe me, they only get wilder from here. We've got tips on handling wild animal encounters, navigating by the stars.
And don't forget the one about poisonous mushrooms.
Oh, right. We can't leave those out. We'll delve into those and more. But first, let's talk about this guide on navigating wild animal encounters. Okay, wild animal encounters. That's something I think we all hope we can avoid. But if we can't, what's the best way to handle those hairy situations?
Well, this guide says the best approach is actually pretty intuitive. It's all about understanding animal behavior. Because often the best way to survive an encounter is to avoid it altogether.
Okay, that makes sense. So less about fending off a charging grizzly and more about, not getting on their bad side in the first place.
Exactly. It's about de-escalation and using your knowledge of their behavior to your advantage. Did you know that if you encounter a bear in the wild, running is the absolute worst thing you can do?
Really? I always thought that was instinct to just get out of there as fast as possible.
Yeah, it seems counterintuitive, but running triggers their predatory instincts. They'll see you as prey and give chase.
Yikes. Okay, so much for that plan. So what are you supposed to do? Play dead. Climb a tree.
Those tactics might work in certain situations, but this guide emphasizes what you can do immediately to kind of diffuse the situation. It suggests speaking in a calm voice, slowly waving your arms above your head and backing away slowly. You want to appear large and non-threatening, giving the bear a chance to realize you're not worth the effort.
So no sudden movements or screaming like you're in a horror movie. Got it. Just stay calm. Don't make yourself look like an easy meal.
Exactly. Now, when it comes to big cats like lions or tigers, the guide takes a bit of a different approach.
Oh, how so? I imagine those are a whole different ballgame compared to bears.
With big cats, it's all about projecting confidence and dominance.
Really? So the opposite of playing it cool with a bear. You want to sort of show them who's boss.
In a way, yeah. The guide recommends making yourself as large as possible, keeping eye contact, and making noise. It's about disrupting their hunting strategy. Big cats are ambush predators. They rely on stealth.
So if you take away the element of surprise and stand your ground.
Exactly. You're suddenly a much less appealing target. They'd rather go for an easier meal than risk injury by taking on something that's going to fight back.
Wow, fascinating stuff. Okay, what about wolves? What's the strategy there? Hide in a bush and hope they don't sniff you out.
Wolves actually have some similarities to bears in terms of how you should react. Again, don't run. It triggers their chase instinct. The key is, again, to stand your ground, make yourself look as big as possible, and maintain eye contact with the dominant wolf. Project that alpha energy.
Okay, so no running from bears or wolves. Got it. Now what about snakes? Because I feel like there's no real reasoning with a venomous serpent, right?
You're right. Snake encounters are a different beast altogether. With snakes, the guide really hammers home prevention as the best strategy. It gets into how to identify venomous snakes, how to avoid their habitats in the first place, and of course, what to do if you do find yourself face-to-face with one.
Okay, so let's say, worst case scenario, I'm hiking along, minding my own business, and I come across, a rattlesnake.
Yeah.
What's the best course of action?
The most important thing is to stay calm and give the snake space. Don't try to handle it, don't try to shoo it away, just don't do anything that could be perceived as a threat.
So basically, admire it from a safe distance and let it slither on its way.
Precisely. Most snake bites happen when people try to interact with the snake.
Right. You don't want to provoke something that could potentially end your hiking trip early. Okay, so we've covered wild animal encounters, which are hopefully something we can avoid. But what about prepping for something like a natural disaster, which is a little harder to outrun?
Well, you actually have a couple of guides here that focus on disaster preparedness, one aimed specifically at women, and another on general emergency prepping.
Okay, so let's talk about those. What are some essential things everyone should know about weathering a natural disaster?
Well, the guide for women really emphasizes two major things. One, have a plan. Two, be prepared to evacuate if you need to. It also really stresses having a bug-out bag ready to go.
A bug-out bag. Now, that's a term I've definitely heard thrown around. What exactly does that entail?
It's essentially a portable kit with everything you might need to survive for at least 72 hours in an emergency. Things like water, non-perishable food, a first aid kit, copies of important documents, even a change of clothes.
Oh, okay. So it's like the ultimate just-in-case bag.
Exactly. You don't want to be scrambling for your passport or medication in the middle of a hurricane.
Yeah.
And this guide also talks about staying informed about weather alerts and evacuation orders.
Right, because knowing what's going on is half the battle.
Right.
Okay.
That one goes beyond the bug-out bag. It talks about stuff like knowing how to turn off the utilities in your home, securing loose objects that could cause damage or injury, and having a communication plan with family and loved ones.
Communication, that's such a good point, especially if phone lines go down. And speaking of which, there was also a guide on, alternative communication methods, right?
You're right, there's a whole guide on that. It talks about everything from walkie-talkies to ham radios, those are amateur radios for long-distance communication, to things like flares, and even, get this, coded messages.
Coded messages, okay. Now that's thinking outside the box, like secret spy codes.
It's all about resourcefulness, right? What do you do when your phone doesn't work? This guide encourages you to get creative and think of simple signals you could use with your family or friends, like, a specific whistle pattern or even just a predetermined spot where you'd leave a message.
That's so cool. Like a modern-day message in a bottle, but with potentially higher stakes.
Yeah.
Wow, these guides are really comprehensive.
They really are. And remember, we haven't even touched on the one about poisonous mushrooms.
Oh, right. We can't forget about those. I'm all for a little adventure, but I'm not sure I want to risk accidentally eating the wrong mushroom. Okay, so let's talk about those mushrooms. What's the deal with the poisonous ones? I'm assuming we should probably avoid eating those, right?
Yeah, that's a safe bet. This guide really drives home just how many poisonous mushrooms are out there.
Like more than I'd expect.
Yeah, way more. And some just cause, an upset stomach or something. But others, deadly.
Yikes. So how do you know which ones to steer clear of? Are there any obvious signs? Or do I need to become a mushroom expert to tell the difference?
It does get pretty complicated. But this guide does highlight some common things to watch out for, like bright colors are often a red flag, or unusual shapes. And sometimes they have a milky sap, or the sap changes color when it goes to air. But honestly, the biggest takeaway is don't eat any mushroom unless you are 100% sure what it is.
Yeah, good advice. I think I'll stick to my trail mix. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. Wild animals, natural disasters, even how to send coded messages. And of course, our new favorite survival tool, the humble condom.
Who knew they were so versatile, right?
But it seems like the overarching theme here is being prepared, having the knowledge and the skills to handle whatever comes your way.
Absolutely. It's about being adaptable, resourceful, and maybe a little bit wary of brightly colored mushrooms.
Exactly. Is there anything else in this stack of survivalist wisdom that we haven't gotten to yet?
Well, there is one more. It's called wise prepping, and this one seems a little different. It's less about the practical skills and more about the mindset of prepping.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So less about the how-to and more about the why.
Yeah, exactly. It talks about self-reliance, taking responsibility for your own safety and well-being, and it also emphasizes the importance of community, helping others, especially in times of need.
That's a really important point. Prepping isn't just about, hoarding supplies and building bunkers. It's about being a good neighbor, a responsible member of a community.
Exactly, because at the end of the day, we're all in this together, right?
Right. This wise prepping guide mentions something called the Rule of Three. What's that all about?
Oh yeah, that's a good one. It's a simple way to remember the basic priorities of survival. Basically, it says you can survive 3 minutes without air, 3 days without water, and 3 weeks without food.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that puts things in perspective.
Right. Air is obviously the most critical, then water, then food. But it highlights how important it is to have access to clean drinking water, especially in a survival situation.
Which, of course, brings us back to our trusty friend, the condom. Who knew we'd be talking about those as a water storage solution today?
Hey, whatever works, right? It's all about being creative and resourceful.
Exactly. So what's your biggest takeaway from all this? Is this just a bunch of weird survival advice, or is there something more to it?
I think for me, it all boils down to knowledge and preparation. We can't always control what happens in the world, but we can control how we respond to it. And by learning some basic survival skills, being aware of our surroundings, having a plan, we can face those unexpected situations with a lot more confidence.
I love that. And I have to say, after this deep dive, I'm definitely feeling more prepared for whatever life throws my way, from wild animals to natural disasters and everything in between.
And hey, even if you never need to use any of these survival skills, it's still pretty fun knowledge to have, right?
Absolutely. It's always good to be prepared. So to everyone listening, if you had to choose between a multi-tool and a box of condoms for your survival kit, what would you choose? This deep dive might just make you think twice. Let us know what you think about these survival kit secrets down in the comments. And if you have any other unconventional survival hacks, we want to hear those too.